Good morning, everybody. It's Misha. Happy Monday morning. We're going to talk this morning about anxiety, depression, and migraine headaches, and really how insulin resistance is affecting your brain and causing you problems. So, we're going to dive into that this morning. And then, yes, I'm going to go over the solution that I found that's been helping me. But let's talk about this. So, how many of you guys have feel like you understand what insulin resistance is? If you think you understand it, put a one in the chat. If you think you need to know more about what insulin resistance is and why we talk about it and what's causing it, put a two in the chat for me so I understand where everybody's at. Do you feel like you got a grip on insulin resistance, or maybe do you need a little bit more information? So think about that for a second and give me a one if you think you got it, two if you think you need more to understand what insulin resistance is and why it's such a problem. And good morning, everybody. Long weekend. I hope everybody had, or at least here in the US, I hope everybody had a great weekend and enjoyed your time. If you had it with your family, I certainly did mine. We were super busy. Um, and it's amazing that we're going to talk about anxiety today because one of the visitors, a family friend that came out, has high anxiety. And I'm going to tell this little story. It was a moment in time for me that I had to understand not everybody wants to hear this, right? I get it. So fortunately here on TikTok or on Facebook or YouTube or X, you guys all want to hear this. That's why you're here. But so she suffered with anxiety. She has lipid problems. She has headaches. She has fatigue. She has the big belly. She has the tummy, the face, and the sleep apnea stuff going on. So many of the symptoms, and so I, in all good faith, was trying to talk to her about insulin resistance, and because she's been in the healthcare field, not a doctor or a nutritionist, but in the healthcare field for a while, she just felt like, no, I got this under control. This is all just me and my genetics. And it didn't matter how much I tried to talk to her about, like when I look at her not being a practitioner, but understanding insulin resistance, I'm like, holy cats, one thing could be changing your entire life. And she just didn't want to hear it. And that's fair. What my hope is today, that if some of you guys are like that, you're like, I just don't know if I can believe this. I don't just know if I can hear this. At least please put it in your back pocket. Hold on to it. When you're ready to understand it, remember that we had this talk and come back and start to understand a little more. Sometimes it's just planting a seed. Sometimes it's like we're hopping in and helping. But what I want you to know is all of those things that she was displaying, lipid problems, anxiety, headaches, the big belly, the heavy face, and all of that, and a number of other issues she had, all are highly linked to insulin resistance. Especially when you go, okay, well, maybe I have high migraine headaches, but I don't have the rest. Well, maybe there's something else. But when you stack all of those together, then it's a pretty clear indication that you're suffering from some insulin resistance. So I didn't get any response on whether you guys understood it or not. So we're just going to dive into how insulin resistance is affecting your brain. And then I'll talk a little bit about what insulin resistance is, and then we're going to go over the solutions. So, look, 20 years ago, as early as 20 years ago, scientists thought insulin didn't impact the brain at all. But since then, and since we've been diving into more and more studies about insulin and how it impacts the entire body, scientists have understood that the brain cells have insulin receptors on them as well. Let's stop for a minute. Insulin is a hormone that's carrying, we're going to break it down real simple, that's carrying energy to the body in the form of glucose. Does glucose have to come from carbohydrates? No, it doesn't. I made that mistake when I was starting this journey too. We do not have to have those. Great if you have them, if you have the right kinds, but glucose is really the energy source that insulin is carrying around. But the cells in the brain have insulin receptors as well, which means this, and we know that two things the brain needs: cholesterol and glucose. We talk about how bad those are for us all the time. So, like, what are we supposed to do if our brain needs insulin, if it needs glucose and it needs cholesterol? What are we supposed to do when we're being told that it's too high everywhere else, and yet now we're suffering with our brain? Well, what we've got to do is understand that with this dysregulation of glucose and the dysregulation of insulin, because it's being called on too often, we have start to have a breakdown in how things function. So, one of the areas we talk about, and one of the solutions I'm going to get to in a minute, has to do with the blood brain barrier. When we look at the brain, the body's very, very protective of your brain. It's not going to just let anything up in there. So, like all the negative things we do, some people, drugs, whether it's prescription or recreational, whether it's smoking or alcohol or all of those kind of things, the body's very careful about how much of that it lets in. There's this thing inside of our blood vessels, the innermost layer of our blood vessels is called the endothelium. That is actually the blood brain barrier. And it starts kind of here a little bit. We're going to start right here because with insulin resistance, those blood vessels are thickening and they're becoming more tight, and they're not able to produce stuff like nitric oxide to allow them to open up and flow. But where does it get to the brain? Well, that barrier starts to get resistant to letting anything through when it's so thick and dense and unable to move like it's supposed to. So now this barrier that should be letting good things into our brain is not only keeping out the bad things, but it's keeping out a lot of the good things too. And so our brain is literally getting starved to death with insulin resistance. Not starved to death, but starved to headaches, starved to anxiety and depression. So inside the brain, when insulin is not functioning properly, it starts to mess with how serotonin affects our brain and our body. It just is not able to utilize serotonin as well. With that problem with serotonin and being able to feel good and regulate our emotions, now we start to have some anxiety. Our anxiety is going up. There's another key piece to why the anxiety is going up in the brain, and that is cortisol. When insulin is high, cortisol tends to go up. Now, cortisol we generally talk about with the heart, but it's creating this stress mode, this light stress mode all the time. And our brain is like, oh my gosh, how much stress am I supposed to deal with on a day? It's like it never gets a break from that. So now you're starting to have some anxiety. Now, the serotonin's not working well, but so is the dopamine. So even when you get these things that should be a good dopamine hit to make you feel better, you're not able to utilize that. So you just never get that feel good moment in life from the dopamine when you have insulin resistance because it's interacting and downplaying the effects of dopamine in your brain. And now what happens long term with that is we start seeking out things to give us that pleasure. And one of those things happens to be eating. So you'll see eating disorders in a lot of people with insulin resistance who are also experiencing migraines, anxiety, and depression because what they're really searching for is to get that dopamine hit in their brain that insulin is like blocking, saying, nope, no dopamine for you today. So we're searching for it. And a lot of people start overeating and eating like in this search for that ooh, ah feeling, that good feeling that they get from dopamine. And it's just not coming as much. So they're eating more or they're doing more of certain behaviors to get that dopamine when really all it is this blood sugar dysregulation leading to insulin dysregulation for many, many people. So, what research has shown is that in a person who has insulin resistance, and I'm going to have to say, I was struggling a couple of years ago with my memory function, and I was a bit frustrated by it. But let's finish with the science. So, what they show is that for every 10 years you have insulin resistance in the brain, this kind of not getting energy to the brain ages 2 years faster than a person with normal insulin levels. So I had 40 years, approximately 40 years of insulin resistance, and no doctor caught it. It was just that I started a system and started understanding why all of these things got better, and it all linked into insulin resistance. But when we go back with the doctor and look, it's probably been about 40 years that I had insulin resistance. That means that my brain is aged now by about 8 years more than it should be because of all of that insulin resistance for all of those years. Shutting down my ability to use serotonin, shutting down my ability to use dopamine, years of high anxiety and high cortisol. I was starting to have Alzheimer's type symptoms, and my kids were actually worried about it 3 years ago. My son was horrified that he was going to end up taking care of his mom because I literally showed so many signs of Alzheimer's that he thought he was going to lose me cognitively early. By addressing the insulin resistance, I was able to stop those symptoms of Alzheimer's and reverse almost all of them so that I'm not suffering with all of the memory loss and the I would get confused as to where I was and I couldn't park straight and all of these things that were happening. And I didn't attack the Alzheimer's because I was in denial that it was even happening. I just really was trying to get my diabetes under control. And as a result, all of these brain issues started to get better too. In fact, one of the first things that got noticed for me when I was on a Zoom call with a friend and we did business together, and I started it on a Sunday morning, and by Wednesday, she and I had a meeting. So Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, 4 days in, I'm in a meeting live with her, and she stopped and said, "Wait a second. I want to know what you're doing. What's changed?" She said, "You have a better mood. You have better energy. You look better, and you're not struggling through things like you used to do. What did you change?" And all I had changed was this one simple system. But in 4 days' time, it started to help me already just feel better and have energy. So what's happening is when we're not getting those insulin clues up into the brain, not only is it affecting your serotonin and your dopamine and your cortisol, but it's affecting how much of that glucose for energy you can actually get into your brain. Because insulin is the carrier that delivers it. And if those insulin receptors in the brain are shut down, now it's not delivering. Well, it's getting the glucose there, but the cell just isn't responding. It's not taking it up. So now we have brain cells that are basically starving for energy. So we're ending up with migraine headaches. And yes, all of this can cause some depression as well. So one of the easiest ways to start addressing some of these things is to get your insulin levels under control, and so that your body and brain can start to use the energy that it needs more efficiently. And that's really the biggest key into addressing, for me, for addressing anxiety, depression, migraine headaches, even things like Alzheimer's. And we've seen it help people with Parkinson's like symptoms where they're just getting tremors because there's misfirings in the brain. Now, Alzheimer's, I'm not prepared to talk about this morning. I've talked about it a lot, but it does have to do with plaques and tangles in the brain and how insulin can affect even that. So it's well known that Alzheimer's tends to be something that's very highly associated with diabetes. It's so much so that it's considered type 3 diabetes, meaning your diabetes has just gone on so long that it's really negatively impacted your brain. If you're starting to see these symptoms, what you want to know is that you want to take care of it now so that you're not losing cognitive function altogether. So I've lost about 8 years off of my brain health because of long-term insulin resistance that should have never been. But to be honest, for 40 years, doctors didn't understand it. Remember, I said 20 years ago, they didn't understand how insulin affected the brain, and they thought that brain issues were all very separate from insulin resistance. I remember going into a doctor, had severe depression, anxiety, um, my blood pressure was going up, the whole thing. And she was just like, "Oh, honey, it's not you. It's not that you have bad thinking." And I want people to know with depression that it's not that you are a bad person. It's that your brain's not getting the energy it needs. So it's not getting the neurotransmitters and all the hormones that you need in your brain just are not able to be utilized properly because insulin is a party killer in your brain. So how can you make yourselves more sensitive to insulin? That's a great question. Let's just dive right into that. So a couple of the things, I'm going to give you my 6 simple tips, and then I will talk about the protocol that I use that really helped me with all of those because I couldn't do it alone. So 6 simple tips. And you guys, I do have an ebook, but I've got to find a new place to house it, and then I'll get that back up. But if you want the ebook, message me separately, and I'll send it to you so you can have all of this all of this information. But the first step is, what I want you to understand is, when we have sugar in our food, the thing that regulates sugar in our food is fiber. One of the reasons we're so sick is because so much fiber has been stripped out of our foods. Even our raw organic foods do not have as much fiber as they used to. And fiber was put there by nature to slow down and regulate sugar and lipids. And not every fiber does the same job. So it's really important to get a variety of fibers in. But the big clue here is, before you eat, every time you eat, especially if you're having any kind of carbohydrates, is to get fiber in first. And know that green salad is not going to do that. You'd have to eat like 8 heads of lettuce to get in the right amount of fiber, or about or a bushel of broccoli. So what do we do if we know that fiber's been stripped and modified and engineered out of our food? We're going to have to supplement with some fiber. And you guys, I talk about all the time, this is not the thing, it's one type of fiber. What we're looking for is a multiplex, that's a new word for me, of fiber, a variety of fibers that can attack these blood sugars, get them to slow down the absorption into the system, and regulate how and when they get in the system. And I mean how and when. And so it can reduce some of the blood sugar that gets into your system in the first place. The reason we're having so much blood sugar is because we have so little fiber. Science is showing that most of us are only getting in 10 to 16 grams of fiber. And there's an interesting article I have not had a time to read yet, but another article came out by a doctor this morning, and I can't remember which one. Maybe it was Dr. Hyman, but talking about the importance of fiber and that we're not getting enough. So step one, fiber first before you eat, every time you eat. Now, if you're somebody who eats a ton of a variety of dark and darkly colored above ground vegetables and stuff, great, that you can have that, but you want to increase fiber before you eat. Number two, we're going to get into macros a little bit. So how do I want to do this? We'll just talk about this first. I'll give you the 6 simple tips, then I'll come back and explain it, because otherwise I get off track. So fiber first, and then you want to prioritize protein. Remember, we need to aim to get in about 30 grams of fiber a day. 37 is where the science really hit, 37 grams. Most of us are only getting in less than half of that. So we've really got to double down on fiber, especially when you're eating. Protein. Proteins do not spike your insulin very much at all, especially when they're a standalone. They give you more building blocks, all the stuff that your body needs, but amazingly, some of that protein can be broken down into glucose. That glucose doesn't always spike your insulin because the body has back doors in the form of GLUT, I think it's 4 and 1, that allow glucose into the system when it's coming from something like protein. So it doesn't spike your insulin as high as carbohydrates. So protein, we need about, an active normal person needs about a gram of protein per pound of body fat, or body weight. That's ideal. If you're young and super healthy and an athlete, you probably need a little bit more than that. If you're older like me and not as active, you can drop that down to maybe 0.8 grams per pound of ideal body weight. I still stick with 1 and aim for that. I don't always hit it. Ideally, I'd love to be about 150 to 175 pounds. I carry a lot of lean mass. So I aim to get in 150 to 175 grams of protein a day. Oh my gosh, right? That's a lot for most of us. We're just not getting in enough. When you're looking at weight loss, and when you're looking at a number of other things with insulin resistance, including your brain function, you need protein for those building blocks, so that those tissues and those cells not only have the energy to rebuild, but they have the stuff that they need to rebuild. So fiber first, about 30 to 37 grams of fiber a day. Prioritize protein, about a gram per pound of ideal body weight per day. That's going to help everything. Those muscles, by the way, the more active and the more of that lean tissue you have, the more insulin sensitive you are. They need a lot of glucose for energy. So having that ability to have that muscle is important in your insulin sensitivity. I'm going to talk about another piece of that in a second. Then you want to not fear fats. And this was a conversation I had with the young lady this weekend. it's not just the saturated fats. Yes, saturated fats in too high of an amount can be a problem too. But it's those trans fats and those seed oils that tend to be causing inflammation and problems in the body that shut down your sensitivity to insulin. So you want to focus on fats like extra virgin olive oil. Read the bottle. Make sure that it says it's 100% olive oil. That one's tough because otherwise it's cut with a lot of seed oils. You're still getting the inflammation. Avocado oil. My favorite, not for cooking, but for everything else, is coconut oil, butter, ghee, and the animal fats. There's been more and more science coming out showing that in the right environment, when you're not overloading your body with sugar and you're eating these what I term healthier fats, it's not causing cholesterol problems. The cholesterol problem really comes when you're combining fats and sugars and way too much sugar. And that's a whole other thing I was thinking about talking about tomorrow, why fats are so confusing for people and where we should be with them. You just want to know that you don't want to have stuff that's highly sugared and highly fat content. That's going to cause a problem with insulin resistance and with your lipid levels. So, fiber, protein, fats. That's the basis of your diet, right? Fiber, protein, and fats. Now, there's carbohydrates, and almost all of us have to have some kind of carbohydrates, or we think we do. So that's fine. Just limit your carbohydrates and focus on carbohydrates that are not bagged, boxed, or barcoded. You want to have dark leafy green or dark and highly colored above ground fruits and vegetables for your carbohydrates. And if you're really lucky, you're focusing on ones that are high in fiber. Like pears are high in fiber, but they're high in this thing called chlorogenic acids that I love. And so they're lower on the glycemic scale. Berries are high in fiber, lower on the glycemic scale. Another one that's really high in fiber is going to be apples. But pears and berries are my two favorite for fruits and vegetables when I do have them. And I don't eat a lot of fruits, you guys. I just don't. I never have, and I probably never will. I love them, but I've been learning to lean on them as a treat and as that dessert type reward that we look for. So fiber first, prioritize protein, fill up with fats and don't fear them, but the right kind of fats. And then limit your carbs and make sure you're eating your carbs in those lower glycemic, meaning they don't spike your insulin so high or your blood sugar so high, and dark above ground fruits and vegetables. Okay. It's that's probably the easiest way to look at it. Then the other two tips for getting you more insulin sensitive are going to be do some intermittent fasting. I'm reading this great book, and the only thing that I disagree with in this book so far is that he's having you eat 3 big meals and 2 snacks a day, and I absolutely do not ascribe to that. But the rest of his diet advice in here is sound, according to guys like Dr. Bickman. You guys have books everywhere. Dr. Bickman. If you guys really want to understand insulin resistance, get this book, Why We Get Sick. He also has a book coming out in a couple of days. In 3 days, he has a book called How Not to Get Sick that gives you some foods and whatnot that you can eat and ways to prepare them to help you with insulin resistance. This guy, his daily life is looking at fat cells in petri dishes and studying insulin. This is the guy that I trust the most. So you've got to do some intermittent fasting. Our bodies were not meant to eat all the time. We just were not meant for it. Never in history have we eaten so much and expected our bodies to deal with it. We just don't need that much energy. Now, if you're a highly active person and you have a highly physical job and you have all of that, great, then maybe you can eat more than that. Most of us do not have that kind of lifestyle. I get up, I do my workout, I do a few things running around the house, I sit my butt down and I go live for an hour to an hour and a half. Then I spend another couple hours on phone calls and creating content and doing stuff. That's not a very active lifestyle, really. So I don't need to eat as much. And I find now that I've trained my body to eat less, it's really hard for me to try and eat more. Do some intermittent fasting. We'll talk about intermittent fasting in a second and why that works and why it's so important. But what you need to know is intermittent fasting is not about calorie restriction. It's about allowing your body to flip the switch metabolically between burning sugar for fuel or burning fat for fuel. When you're in a fasted state, you're burning fat for fuel and you're relying less on this sugar. Now, sugar, we're giving our body that when we break down the fat. It's releasing those glucose stores. So we don't need to ingest more, especially if you have any kind of excess weight. You can get this fat to be used in your body, and your body needs it. Remember, your brain not only needs glucose, but it needs cholesterol. So if you're not getting these fats moving through the body, you're having some cognitive issues as well, and then you're overloading with sugar. So fasting is not about calorie restriction, it's about stopping that constant influx of sugar so our body can flip and use fats for fuel. The last tip is going to be to move your body. We just talked about it, right? We're just not as active as we used to be. We need to be more active. My insulin resistance really tipped over into diabetes when I stopped competing. When I stopped working out 3 hours a day, 6 days a week, that's when I wasn't doing anything different. But my body all of a sudden went, boop, now we're diabetic. Well, insulin resistance was all along in the background. And it just took the one thing that changed, which was me not moving as much, to flip it right into diabetes. Movement is extremely important. And you guys, if you feel like you're in a chair and or your body hurts so bad, your joints hurt so bad that you just can't get up and move, trust me, I've been there, but you have to move. There's so many. You know what? My favorite channel now, I don't do Netflix, I don't do Disney, I don't do any of those. My favorite channel now is YouTube. And I just go on there. If I want to work out, I type in what kind of workout I want. There it is. Amazing. We have this amazing technology today. Go find some gentle workouts that get your body moving according to your own limitations, but get your body moving. Maybe it's a walk. Maybe you put a backpack on with your walk so that you add an extra 5, 10, maybe 50 pounds so that you're getting some weight resistance in there. But move your body, and it doesn't have to all be at once. You don't have to go to the gym for an hour a day. Hey, James, and hey, Lisa. So you don't have to run to the gym. In fact, the workouts I'm doing now are out of this book, and it's been a godsend to me. 25 Days is the name of the book by Drew Logan. But it's been amazing to me because it's stuff that I can do right here in my home. Take away the excuses of I don't have time to get to the gym today. BS. I have time for 20 minutes in the morning to move my body. So find what works for you and move your body. Muscles that are active and being utilized are now open. Just think of like a Pac-Man. Those muscles, when they're being utilized, they're like Pac-Man. I want to eat up the glucose. I'm going to take that insulin in. And so then that releases the stress on the rest of your body. So insulin is going to your muscles, and then it's not overwhelming the rest of your body, and you start to become more insulin sensitive. But it really takes this whole approach. So again, I'm going to recap, and then we're going to dive into whatever questions you have. So it's fiber first, prioritize protein, don't fear fats. Then we're going to limit your carbs, do some intermittent fasting, and move your body. 6 super easy things that are going to change the needle on your health for insulin resistance. Now, I know when I got to the number 5 one, intermittent fasting, a lot of y'all went, I'm out. I'm out. I can't fast. I can't go that long without food. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to try it. I'm so sugar addicted. I'm so food addicted. I'm so whatever. There's just no way. And my lifestyle is too busy, and there's just no way I could get up and not have breakfast and make it through the morning. You guys, there's this big issue. People think that if you don't have breakfast, you're going to be that Betty White, I need my Snickers bar, whatever it was, where they're crabby and cranky and all of that. No, with regular intermittent fasting, you'll find that those morning times when you're not overloading your body with more sugar and food, you have more mental clarity, you have more energy. You just feel I feel like I went from walking through mud every morning to just like running through water every morning. Intermittent fasting does not make you that crabby person. What's happening is if you're crabby at first when you start intermittent fasting, that's a good sign that your body is so used to burning sugar and sugar only that it's a little cranky at you. So that sign, if you're doing intermittent fasting and you're a little crabby, then understand that you have a blood glucose dysregulation problem that you need to get under control, which means you also have an insulin resistance problem that you need to get under control. You should be able to make it through a fast and experience an uplift in your mood and experience an uplift in your energy and not the opposite. If it's the opposite, you know that you're already in trouble and you got to start addressing it. So, what's happening with fasting? Let's go over that so you guys can understand why this little tiny bit of fasting is important. And by the way, this tea that I keep drinking in the morning, it helps me have energy, mental clarity, shuts down my hunger, and makes that fast super easy. In fact, I've had people who started it who said, I can do everything else, but I can't do the fast because I'm just so sugar addicted. And I remember one of them, she called me day one. She was so excited. And I love when you guys are excited about getting your health back. But she called me day one and said, what's in this stuff? It's 1 p.m. I haven't eaten and I'm not even hungry. Can you imagine that? So, and that continued for her. She just felt like, I don't need to eat in the morning. I'm really good with having 2 meals a day. And she started recognizing what I just said. Now, instead of being that crabby, hangry person in the morning, she's vibrant and full of energy. So I fast 16 to 18 hours a day. Let's go over that. So dinner for me last night, my let's talk about, do you guys want to talk about what I ate yesterday? I'm leaning a little bit more into carnivore and trying to really cut the carbs down. So yeah, it's gonna be a little tough. So I did have 3 meals yesterday. I had I had sirloin steak with Montreal seasoning cooked in butter for lunch. A pretty decent sized sirloin steak. That was my lunch. I preceded it with my fiber, so I was getting fiber in, and I had a tea twice yesterday. Then I did have, because I'm upping my game with my activity and cleaning up everything else, but I did have a protein shake that had like a sugar-free nut butter in it for fats, and it had some. I put a little bit of mint extract in there, but it was just protein, about 40 to 50 grams of protein, a little bit of carbohydrates, and those fats. That's what I had about 3 hours later. And then before I shut everything down, I had some chicken cooked in cream cheese and butter. And that was my day yesterday. Now, should you add in more vegetables? Probably. I'm going without them right now because I'm trying to get this whole body under control. But that was my day yesterday. High in protein. So really, and I had fiber before each time. So I got in probably 20 grams of fiber, not the 37, but I'm going to talk about why I'm okay with that. But I got in about 150 grams of protein yesterday. So here's what's happening. So that means 6 o'clock last night was about the last time I had food. So we're now again at about 60. We're just closing in on 16 hours of fasting. I am trying to train my body to eat at the same time every day so it knows what to do. So I won't eat for another 2 hours. That means I'll be 18 hours fasted. I'm going to open up with some heavy proteins and fats, trying to get that in my system earlier in the day. I don't want heavy red meats in my system before I go to bed and then have to be working on digesting those. I want those digesting and delivering those building blocks while I'm up and moving. And then I'll probably have some kind of chicken and maybe some vegetables tonight before I'm done. In between times, I won't need to eat today unless I'm trying to get in protein. And the only reason I had the protein shake yesterday was to focus on nutrition and getting my protein up. So, fasting, I keep saying we're going to talk about that. It takes about 2 hours after you eat for your blood sugars to really spike to the level that's going to reflect what you just ate. So about 2 hours after you eat. Now, say I eat today at noon. About 2 hours after that, my blood sugars are going to be the highest they will be after that meal. And then they start to drop. Now, when the blood sugars have spiked after that meal, they start right away, but then it takes 2 hours to see that the whole spike. At that point, insulin is coming out to deliver that energy. Now, about 4 hours later, if I haven't had something that's high in carbohydrates, if I haven't had all of these excess foods that we just don't need, my blood sugar levels will start to drop. And they'll get down to, I don't know, 60, 70, but they'll be in a manageable range. By the way, you can get down to 60 with your blood sugar levels if you're not feeling fatigue, headaches, like you're going to pass out. That's when it's a danger sign. And if you're highly dysregulated, you might want to watch that. I regularly get down to 60 on my blood sugars or lower, and I'm fine because my body now is trained to start going through and pulling um, energy from other sources like fat to get those blood glucose levels back up. But at hour 4, blood sugars start to come down. Now, that insulin increase that started at hour 2 will start to come down after this blood sugar level starts to drop. But insulin takes a while longer to drop than the blood sugars. So even in an insulin sensitive person, according to Dr. Bickman, it can take 8 or 10 hours for that insulin level to drop down. We're just going to go with 8 hours. Say you're insulin sensitive and at 8 hours your insulin comes down. Why is that important? Insulin is anabolic. It wants things to grow. And so it's a primary hormone. It's going to take precedence over almost everything else. Some things there's a negative feedback loop, like with cortisol. But insulin is regulating your energy. It's regulating what your body does. It's telling your body, I want you to grow. So I'm delivering all of this energy and you need to grow. I'm not going to let anything disrupt that. I'm here to protect the growth in the body. You cannot burn fat or break down things as long as I'm here. But what's happening is the cells are saying, yeah, I don't want any more of you. So they're already starting to have problems. But insulin is going to stop the fat breakdown because it wants to store all of that. When insulin can't get its package to the cells of the body, it's going to start stuffing it in your fat cells. But we have to get insulin down in order to allow our body to utilize its other source of fuel, which is fat. Now, this is part of why we focus on fats more and proteins, because now we're training our body that fat is a fuel. We've trained our bodies that the only fuel that we can give it for energy is sugar. And so our body's angry and saying, I need sugar all the time, when really our body's really adept at using fat for fuel. It's just never been told that it could in the way we live today. Insulin comes down. Now, it's not out there protecting these fat cells and saying you can't break down. Glucagon comes out, and glucagon is there to start rising your blood sugar back up when you're in a fasted state, because we need glucose for energy in the system and in the brain, or we do start to get that hangry feeling. Now, when glucagon comes out, it's breaking down those fat cells. It's breaking down and eating up these cells that are or starting the process of in the body. A number of things have to happen. But this part where you're starting to utilize cells that need to go. Things like cancer, heart health, brain health have all been proven to improve when there's fasting going on, because this fasting is allowing our body to tear down the stuff that needs to go and utilize it as energy on its way out the door. Okay. So we have to get insulin levels down. That's 8 hours, right? Glucagon doesn't come out for about 2 hours after. So now we're at hour 10. When glucagon comes out, it's not like this switch. It doesn't just happen quickly. But when glucagon comes out and starts to flood the body and send its little message out to the body goes, oh, okay, now is the time. So now HGH, human growth hormone, starts to come out. Ketones start to be produced. So now at about hour 12, you're having these HGH and ketones starting to come out in the absence of insulin. Now, at about hour 14, when those messengers are starting to get through the body, we start to see this fat burning mode. So it takes about 14 hours if you're semi-insulin sensitive to get to this fat burning mode where you're able to use up some of that inflammation, the excess fat, and the toxicities. Now you should be in a state called autophagy. I keep thinking glucagon, glucagon. So it's autophagy, and so now you're kind of recycling all these cells that need to go out anyway. Now you're in a fat burning mode. Now you're allowing energy into your brain, and you're actually getting those fats into your brain and utilize that you should have. You're affecting your heart health. You're affecting your gut health, and you're reducing those cells that could become cancerous later on. Fasting is super important for us. That's at about hour 16. Like I said, today it's going to be about 18 hours for me, which is great because that just means I have a couple more hours of this cleaning up junk in my system, which is absolutely what I want. I'm 60 years old. I know I've done some damage to my body. I know that I need to clean that up. I know that a year or two of healthy living isn't going to downplay 60 years of crap that I did to my body. So I want to do some intermittent fasting, and I want to do it daily. Do I do 16 hours every single day? No, I don't. There are days where it's only 12 hours of fasting. I just know that on those days that I need to be careful with the sugars that I'm eating because I didn't give my body the best chance to go through this fasting phase. Does that explain intermittent fasting for everybody and why it's kind of important for those things to happen? Um, I'm not saying you have to do long-term fasts. Studies have shown that this 16 hours of fasting is fantastic. I know that a lot of people like to do OMAD, and you guys, can we talk about mindset here? I want to shift this a little bit. So I'm not going to deny that calories play a role in whether we're gaining weight or losing weight or whether we're doing a lot of these other things in our body. But fasting, let's not get fasting confused with calorie restriction. If you're sedentary and you're eating 5,000 calories a day, yes, you're going to have a problem with weight. That's just a reality. But does this mean you need to go down to 1,500, 1,200, 500 calories a day to affect your metabolism? No. In fact, when you're doing those extreme calorie restrictions, what you're doing is telling your body that it's not going to get in enough energy, and so that the body starts to down regulate its metabolism. Eating every couple hours doesn't upregulate your metabolism, and I'll explain that in a second. But these starvation diets are also not upregulating your metabolism. They're actually dampening your metabolism to the point that now it says, oh, you want to feed me 1,000 calories a day and you want to live like this? We're going to live like this. And it's going to start to downplay its energy needs to match that 1,000 calories. Now, when you're done and you think, okay, hey, I can go back to normal life, and you try to go back up to 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 calories, you're going to pile on weight because your metabolism got downregulated to match the energy that you were giving it before. So it's not about calorie restriction. What it is about is this interplay of hormones and allowing insulin to come down so that we can actually start utilizing the stores that we have in our body that I trained you guys as I want to talk about that too. Whew, I want to talk about a lot. As a world champion athlete, I trained fasted almost every single time I went to the gym. I rarely trained fed. And yet somehow I was able to set 15 world records and win 4 world championships. Somehow, training fasted, not being fed fully, I was able to do all of that and have really dense muscle on my body. You like really trying to avoid taking GLP-1, Tina, and you know what? There's more and more information. I'm going to do a video that I'm going to duet someone who talked about the GLP-1s and she was on them, had devastating results. I'm going to try and get that video up today. But and a great friend of mine watched a science symposium on these GLP-1 drugs and some of the damaging effects to your brain as well as to your heart from those. And so, yeah, if you can avoid GLP-1s at all, please do. Now, I don't know if I have her picture up. I don't think I have it up where I can do it. But tomorrow I'm going to try and have a computer or a TV behind me so I can show you some of these pictures. But I have a woman who's lost over 160, I think it's 170 pounds now, who was told she needed a GLP-1. She refused and she did this instead. And so now she's got her weight under control. and a number of other things that she was suffering with are now under control as well. Her husband has lost 80 pounds. I have a young man who has lost 190 pounds and was told he needed GLP-1s or gastric bypass surgery. Yeah, so gastroparesis, let's talk about it really quickly. GLP-1. I don't want to talk about the solution, so I'm going to tell you guys this, and then we're going to dive into the GLP-1s. But so this system is just this. It's a tea I have in the morning, a tea I have in the afternoon, and a pre-meal drink that I have before I eat. Now, the way we're doing it is the tea, 2 teas a day, and the pre-meal drink before your largest food, your largest meal with carbohydrates in it. I, at 60 years old, am such a believer in fiber that I have 2 to 3 of these a day, especially because I don't eat a lot of other fruits and vegetables. But this is what's protecting me from blood sugar spikes, and it can cause an increase in your own natural glucagon-like peptide, GLP-1. Let's talk about the difference. And then these teas can increase your GLP-1 naturally by about 70% in your body, putting it up close to what we can do with those drugs. Now, one of the problems with the drugs is GLP-1 is not meant to last in your body for very long. So when you increase GLP-1 and it goes out and it does its effects, it's supposed to wane and die off. And then if you need more, you can, create more. The GLP-1 drugs have been, again, modified to a point where they don't break down. Okay. So they're just constant in your system. Well, now that starts to become more like insulin resistance, where you're like, your body's like, dude, we were never meant to have GLP-1 so consistent in our body. We don't know what to do. We're kind of overwhelmed and we're going to start to shut down. So those GLP-1s have been you're injecting them because they can't go through the liver or they're going to degrade. Well, why not just feed yourself in a way that allows you to increase your own GLP-1 that's being produced in your body naturally without all those damaging side effects? So that's what I'm a proponent of. Now, GLP-1 has a number of effects. I want to watch this talk by doctors and scientists on GLP-1s, and then I'll talk about it sometime later this week after I learn what the new information from those. But one of the things they do is it starts to paralyze your gut. And when I mean your gut, so from the stomach on down through your anus, your intestines, all of it start to slow down. Now, what we don't realize when we hear the gurgling and stuff in our stomach, our stomach is working. It's not that it's needing food, but it's working. So there's a lot going on inside of there. If you think of a machine that has all these cogs that are just constantly moving for a little bit of motion, our guts are like that. They're constantly squeezing and contracting to move food along, to extract nutrients out of food, to do all of that. Those synthetic GLP-1s slow all of that down. Now, a stomach that should be contracting isn't contracting. So you get these acidic burps and you get these rancid burps because food is actually sitting in your stomach rotting, because the stomach can't move it through into the small intestine, into the colon, and then out through your butt, right? So it's sitting there. Not only are you getting those gassy burps, those nasty tasting burps, and you just like, I don't want to eat anymore. That's part of why they work, because people are nauseated and they're not wanting to eat. But that continues on through your small intestine. So now, as food is rotting in your gut, some of those nutrients are degrading and they're not getting into your small intestine, which is where the nutrients are pulled out of your food. Stomach breaks it down. Small intestine is what is starting to absorb all these nutrients. Now, it's not getting to your small intestine, so those nutrients can be absorbed until it's all rancid and rotted, and that's a problem. Now you're getting some nutrient deficiency, right? Because you're not getting it into the small intestine in the right amounts at the right time. But then as it's starting to pass through the small intestine, those intestines aren't contracting as well either. And now you start to get blockages in your intestines. Gastroparesis, right? So it's paralysis of your gastrointestinal system. Those blockages sit there and they continue to rot and get rancid, and it causes inflammation in your body, and it causes a lot of other issues from that inflammation, causes a negative gut microbiome, and now you have this blockage that's sitting there and it's putting your life at risk. And so people with gastroparesis and who have an actual blockage end up having to go to the doctor and have that surgically removed. There was a woman who had that happen to her with the GLP-1s, and there was a documentary done on her, and she went off the drug because she almost died. And then she started to gain her weight back because guess what? They don't teach you what's causing insulin resistance or the problem in the first place. They don't talk to you about your diet and give you proper dietary recommendations. They don't allow you to teach your body what it needs. They just shove this drug in you. And now so you go off the drug and you haven't changed any of your habits. You haven't changed any of what you're doing. What's going to happen? You're going to gain all that weight back. So that's what happened with her. She started to gain the weight back. And in desperation, she's like, ooh, I really don't like my body heavier. Vanity gets in the way for all of us. And she started back on the drugs. Bam, ended up in the hospital again and was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? So part of the reason I'm here talking about this simple system, it actually increases that GLP-1 naturally in your body in a manner that's not causing all of those issues, but allowing you to gain health back. And it's food. It's not a drug that you're injecting. And I know some people get it on prescription, but those drugs cost $300 to $1,500 a month. So you can end up in the hospital. Why are we doing this? So instead, if we just understand what's been missing from our system so that we can start to address it and reverse it, then we can start to feel better. Okay. So that's my hope for you guys, is that understand and look at, I want to say this too, but I can go on about GLP-1s. I am really not, really not a proponent of them. Okay. I've heard some doctors talk like in a very small dose, how it could be good for the brain and whatnot. I get that. But then why not do something that's increasing your GLP-1 naturally instead of adding something that could potentially harm you? But 70% increase in your own GLP-1 production in your body. And each one of these increases your GLP-1 naturally a little bit. Okay, so we're getting this. Yes, is it going to be as drastic a change as somebody who's on a high dose of those synthetic GLP-1s? No. But are you going to end up with gastroparesis? No. And so here's the thing. The fiber and the tea are actually helping your gut start to work better. So not only is it the intestines, we talked about that, right? We talked about the gut. We talked about those things. We're supposed to be talking about brain, but all this affects. But we start to look at things like the liver and the kidneys and the gallbladder that are all starting to be paralyzed as well with those GLP-1 drugs. Pancreas as well. But it's also putting an overload because guess what? Glucagon and GLP-1 come from your pancreas just like your insulin. Now it's overloading your pancreas on trying to produce glucagon as well. And we're just having problems. But this can affect liver, kidneys, pancreas, gallbladder. The system that I do actually is helping those be more strong. In fact, a lot of people, when they start with the fiber, notice some gas and bloating, some distension. That's one of the big issues that people will complain about. And that gas, bloating, and distension is because your gut is so weak, it doesn't know how to digest food properly. So just like your muscles, if you can't pick up a gallon of milk, maybe I'm weak, I need to work out my muscles. How many of you guys have ever thought, hey, my gut's really weak? It's full of negative bacteria and it just isn't working properly. Now I'm full of inflammation, I have autoimmune disease, and I have memory problems, and I have weight problems, and I have all of that. Maybe I should get my gut stronger. This helps your gut get stronger and start to pass food through at a normal rate for your body. So yes, it's slowing down the delivery of sugars, and it can actually reduce the amount of sugar that's even absorbed into your bloodstream when you have this system. But it's allowing your liver, your gallbladder, your pancreas, your kidneys to work in a manner that's more natural and sustainable for your body. In fact, we've had people with liver disease start to reverse their fatty liver disease by fasting and doing the system. We've had people with stage 3 kidney disease reverse their stage 3 kidney disease and not ever have to go on dialysis, and just on and on and on with all of this stuff in your gut. So you can choose to do an injection that's going to start to put all of that at risk, or you can choose to feed your body nutrients that's going to build all of that up and allow you to do what your body was supposed to do naturally, so you would have never been in this place. But nobody's talking about it. Doctors aren't talking about it until recently because they just kind of poo-pooed insulin resistance. And you'll actually hear there's one gal, and I never say her name, but I always smile when I think about her because she's beautiful and she's lovely and she's vibrant. And, I know she's doing what she feels is best, but she starts talking about, oh, fasting, you don't need to do fasting. And this insulin, this is a bunch of crap. I'm like, really? Because there's so much science out there now that shows that insulin resistance is a real thing. Getting it under control is not only going to impact your health all around, but it's going to start to impact your weight, allow you to put on positive muscle. Let's talk about muscle and GLP-1 in the first place. When you're insulin resistant, I talk about moving your body, getting those muscles open to taking in the insulin. But in an insulin resistant state, the muscles start to shut down to that energy as well because it's so inundated with sugar. It's like, oh, that's just not the energy I needed. Can you hear me? I need something different. I don't want all the sugar all the time. So your muscles start to deplete with insulin resistance anyway. When you start to become more insulin sensitive and open up those pathways, your muscles start to build more naturally. And I'm not talking about bodybuilder type muscle. I'm talking about everyday healthy muscle that you need on your body. So insulin sensitivity helps that in the first place. One of the other things with GLP-1 drugs, and Dr. Bickman has done many talks about this, is that they start to, remember, he studies fat cells in petri dishes every day. And part of what he studies is these GLP-1s and their effect on fat cells, insulin injections and their effect on fat cells, and all the other stuff. But those GLP-1 drugs have been proven to have the propensity to take about 40% of your weight loss. Up to 40% of your weight loss is muscle. So if you were to lose 10 pounds with a GLP-1 drug, what they're saying is up to 4 pounds of that could be muscle that's lost, and only 6 pounds of it be fat. So you take a person who says, oh, I need to lose 100 pounds. I'm going to go on this GLP-1 drug, and they lose 100 pounds. Okay, great. They lost 100 pounds. About 40 of it could be in muscle and only 60 of it be in fat. Now they go off the drug. Now their body doesn't have this synthetic injection of GLP-1, and it's just not used to producing GLP-1, so it's not doing it as efficiently. And they're still having an insulin sensitivity problem because nobody ever taught them what was causing the problem in the first place. They just band-aided it with this overpowered drug that's causing other problems. But now, they lost their 100 pounds, 60 fat, maybe 40 muscle. In a 60-year-old woman like me, that 40 pounds of muscle is not coming back. It's just not. We're not building muscle at the same rate. So I have to be very careful about that, right? But hey, Liz, it's good to see you. I wanted to talk to you anyway. I keep saying that every time I see you. But now, so they've lost fat. They've lost weight. They start to gain weight back because they've gone off the GLP-1 drugs and they don't understand what caused the weight gain in the first place. And they gain the 100 pounds back. Did they gain back 40 pounds of muscle? Can you guys tell me if you believe that they gain back 40 pounds of muscle or even close to that when they go off the drugs, put a 1 in the chat. If you think that they gain back 100 pounds of fat, put a 2 in the chat. I want to see where he's at with this, because I don't think enough people talk about this fact that you can lose so much muscle with the GLP-1 drugs. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that, because are you really trying to lose weight or are you trying to lose fat? Because if you're just trying to lose fat and get your metabolism under control, there's way better ways to do it than those GLP-1 drugs. Especially in the amounts they give you in those injections. It'd be interesting to see what happens in the next several years as people actually start to report back on what's happening with the drugs. But Denise, you're correct. So approximately 100 pounds of that weight loss that comes back is now fat. So then the person goes back on GLP-1 drugs to lose the 100 pounds again. But again, now they're only losing 60 pounds of that gained 100 in fat and up to another 40 in muscle. And all of a sudden, we have a fat, skinny person. They have very little muscle. They have a lot of fat. Their pancreas is failing. Their liver is failing. Their heart's having problems. All of these things, and they just don't seem to have it under control. And is that a cycle anybody wants to be in? I don't think so. So yes, GLP-1 drugs have caused people to lose a lot of weight and feel really good about themselves. That's great. But all the damage that comes along with it, not so great. And the fact that it's not changing your behavior that caused you to be there in the first place, not so great. So again, what you really need to do is just very, very simple. Fiber first, prioritize protein. And Liz, if you're still here, I know you know this one. Don't fear fats. Get in plenty of healthy fats. They help the proteins metabolize, by the way. Limit your carbs. Do some time-based eating. Stop eating all the damn time. You don't need popcorn at midnight. You just don't. And then move your body. That's all you got to do. Now, if you have troubles with doing any of that, you've had salmonella last fall, and ever since you've had distended, bloated stomach, must be muscle loss. Not quite sure about that. But salmonella, because when we look at these infections that we get, what I do want you to understand is this. If your gut microbiome is out of whack and it's full of negative gut microbiota, it's causing inflammation throughout the system. And some of these things like salmonella can really take a hold in your body because now you've created an environment where those things can thrive. So with you, maybe again, not a doctor, I'm just saying if it was me, this is what I would do. I would probably do a cleanse and I would make sure I'm doing the system to get my gut microbiome back in order, to help my stomach get healthier, and to clean all of that up and start to feel better. Now, I was supposed to start a cleanse in June, but then I was traveling and then I didn't want to do it before July 4th, but I actually started on July 3rd doing a cleanse. I will be doing a month-long cleanse for parasites and whatever else. Um, and I'm shocked because I do it about twice a year. And even with that, just you have to understand how much we can get these parasites and stuff into our body and how much they can affect you. For me, I like to do cleanses. It's an herbal concoction that I take and some fiber. And that's available through the same company. But what has happened to my gut, because my gut was getting bloated and distended a lot as well, even though I was taking in fiber, because there was some other infection going on in my gut. So that's all clearing up, and my gut has gone down 2 inches in 3 to 4 days just by moving my body, paying attention to what I eat, and starting to clean out the negative in my gut. Now, if you have inflammation and you have all of that, could you be losing muscle? Probably, but I'm not sure that those are so directly linked. But yeah, distension and bloated stomach can be just from the gut microbiome being so out of whack. And it's one of the reasons I love the system, because both of these, the fiber does an amazing job. 7 different types of fiber in here, really designed to help with all of this weight and insulin resistance part. But getting in those high amounts of fiber has helped keep my gut healthy. But this, through the adaptogens, some of the other components naturally occurring in this, that helps with the microbiome as well. So this, by the way, when we drink this, it's causing this reaction in our gut where, as those positive microbiome, the probiotics start to eat this, it creates something called the off-gassing of it, which is called like, I'm saying this wrong. I look at it as off-gassing. So like they're eating up something and there's a byproduct. The byproduct of the probiotics eating this is short-chain fatty acids. Short-chain fatty acids tell our body to burn fat for fuel and start to help us produce ketone. But it's also strengthening the probiotics in our gut so that we're not having all those problems. When your gut is full of sugar, you have a lot of things like yeast and all of these negative microbiome, and that can definitely cause not only gas and bloating, but it can cause skin infections, vaginal infections, Yeah, for men, all that nasty, stinky stuff that goes on in there, that's a big sign that your gut's out of balance. And so, um, is it Gail? Gail, if you want to know more, there's my numbers right there. Just text me, and I'm more than happy to share with you whatever I can about this. And again, I'm not a doctor, I can't diagnose, just a real world woman who suffered with almost all of this stuff and is trying to help other people understand that it doesn't take medications that are further damaging your body to start to feel better. And really, this is all I did. Oh, and I haven't done that yet. So I need to do, you guys, again, the average person just does one fiber a day. I'm a fiber nut, so I'm going to drink about 3 of these a day along with the fiber for my cleanse. So that's going to get me to around 20 grams of fiber. But again, what I talk about, so this is it. I'm just going to pour this in. I'm going to drink it up quick because I always forget and sit here and talk. But one of the reasons I am okay with 20 grams of fiber from this source and not the 37 is because it's a scientifically designed fiber that's giving me more bang for my buck than 5 grams of this fiber. So it's doing a lot more work, about twice as much work. So if I get in 20 grams of this, it's, for my mind, from the studies that have been shown, it does about the same as that 37 to 40 grams. So I'm good. So that's all it is. I drank it down. That's one serving of my fiber a day. Now, it's purified, it's clean, it's highly potent, and so I'm going to rely on this. And the rest of the day, I'm going to focus on my other nutrients, proteins, fat, and whatever vitamins and minerals I need. This tea is very similar. I've been drinking it in the big mug because I've been getting up earlier. It's the same thing. I'm just going to tear this top off. We're going to pour it in here. But now the tea, it's going to increase my GLP-1 by about 70%. Been drinking it all morning anyway. It's going to give me mental clarity and energy. It's not going to give me crashes or make me feel jittery or any of that. It's going to help my gut microbiome. It has anti-inflammatory, antioxidant properties in it, anti-cancer properties in it. And I was talking about fiber in this. I don't know. I lost it. But the tea is what shuts down my hunger and makes me be able to get through a fast. Because in the beginning, I was as sugar addicted as everyone else, and I didn't think I could do it. And I would regularly go 19 to 20 hours without eating when I was drinking the tea. Now I'm focused on nutrients, so I'm building my body up. I'm not just worried about tearing the fat down. I'm worried about building my body up and giving it what it needs. So now I focus on nutrients. So my meals will be focusing on getting in about 150 grams of protein a day. But that's it. This is all I did. Reversed my diabetes, got rid of my anxiety and depression, got rid of my high blood pressure. Couldn't save my gallbladder. My gallbladder was already so full of stones that they ended up yanking it 3 years ago. But it's helped my liver clean up. It's helped my visceral fat go down. It's helped my teeth and gums stop bleeding, my eyesight get better, my hair start coming in, all of that. And you guys, all I did was this. Does a GLP-1 drug give you any of that? I don't think so. I don't think so. In fact, I know it's not. So do I want to do something? Maybe takes a little bit longer to get it done, but does it much better by just drinking a tea and having some fiber? Absolutely, I do. Neither one of them are a meal replacement. Neither one of them are like pills or any of that you have to take in. That's it. I drink a tea twice a day and I have fiber before I eat. And that's what changed my entire health. So much so that I'm actually working out again. And it's simple. It's about $5 a day, you guys. And if you're interested in doing it, you can either text me. By the way, I updated my link on TikTok. I don't know if it's a TikTok problem or if what it is, but I put a new link in there so you can get to me. The old link was working for everyone that I was like, hey, will you go to my TikTok and check it out? It worked, but I was getting so many messages in that said that it wasn't. So I've updated a link in my TikTok. If you weren't able to get through there, try again, or just text me and I'll get you the link directly because it seems to be an interface with TikTok that was causing the link not to work. But look, it has a 90-day money back guarantee. those GLP-1 drugs and all of that don't give you that. If in 90 days you're not feeling better, your A1C is not down, your lipids aren't down, your blood sugars aren't down, you get your money back. Okay. So I don't know of anything else that's actually building your health, helping you reverse diabetes, insulin resistance, all of this stuff with a 90-day money back guarantee that's real food, that's supporting your body and not tearing it down. So tomorrow, do you guys want to talk about lipids and Deidre? So yeah, we're not getting in. Deidre, I don't remember which one you were answering, but if you think that you're going to gain 40, I think it was on the weight loss. But if you think you're going to gain 40 pounds of muscle back when you start to put the weight on, you're not. You're gaining back fat. If you're younger and you're working out a lot, you may put on some of that back in muscle, but not very much. It's harder to put on muscle once you've lost it, especially as we age. So after age like 40, especially, it gets more and more difficult. 50 is where most women start to have this depletion of weight as far as muscle weight goes. By the time you're 60, 70, you're likely not to put on much of that muscle ever again. It's just gone. So be careful with the GLP-1 drugs. If you're wanting to maintain your healthy weight of muscle and lean tissue is like bones and ligaments as well. It's not just the muscle, but you're losing lean tissue. Um, and we all know that older women suffer from osteoporosis. So why are we ever doing something that's depleting even our muscles being able to, or our bones being able to regenerate? Just doesn't make sense to me. All right, guys, I'll talk tomorrow probably about fats and why I always talk about this whole thing with sugar creating more of those negative fats than the fats themselves when we're talking about healthy fats. So we'll talk about fats, why I say what's healthy is healthy and why I say, the others are unhealthy, and how sugar is playing such a big role in these cholesterol issues and plaques in your arteries and not just the fats. Why sugar is a bigger driver, in my opinion, than the other things, and why I've done better getting rid of the sugar and increasing healthy fats and not having all of those issues. All right, so we'll talk tomorrow. You guys, if you're interested in the system, I do not work on the weekends, so I got a bunch of messages in over the weekend. I've been trying to respond to those this morning. So if you've been waiting for a couple of days to hear from me, just know you should be hearing from me today, and I appreciate your time. We'll talk again tomorrow, and we'll talk about fats, okay? Have a great day, guys.